So my first question, and feel free to shout out if you'd like to start today. How do you define a safer space? And if you could focus on the context of the LGBTQ plus community specifically, that'd be good. But do feel free to talk more broadly about it as well. So who would like to start? Don't be shy.
I'm happy to go.
Go on, dear.
Okay. So I think this is a really good question, and there is a lot of different parts to it. It's like everything within the queer world. We've got to kind of really consider it from different aspects. And are we talking about something which is a safer space in a physical location, a digital space? Are we talking about a safer space which is emotionally safe? And when we again look at queerness, and queerness doesn't exist in isolation, we've got intersectionality there where it comes to race, age, disabilities, neurodiversities, classism. And I think a safer space could really be defined by many, many different aspects. But for me, I suppose what I would consider a safer space is a space in which I don't have to code switch, somewhere where I can kind of breathe and just be like have a breath out and say, well, actually, I belong in this space and I can exist here without judgment, without having to mask. And yeah, I guess that's my initial definition. I don't know what other people think.
Thanks, Darren. Just for anybody else, anybody that's on the call that isn't aware of what code switching is, could you just elaborate a bit on that?
Absolutely. So code switching, I guess, is where we might appear differently in different spaces. So for somebody who's queer, for example, they may minimize their queer traits and they may have to exist as being kind of straight passing, which is a term I absolutely hate, but they may have to exist in a way that helps them to read in a different way for safety, mostly for safety. But also just in terms of minimizing kind of other questions or kind of having to answer loads of bits and pieces that they don't necessarily want to have out there in the public domain. So yeah, that's possibly what I consider it.
Great. Thank you. Who would like to go next? Anything to build on what's already been said or your own take on defining a safe space? Sam, let's go for it.
Cool. So the way that I would define it is that how we turn up into a space, but as long as it's that we're able to be authentic in that representation of ourselves. And much like what Dhiren has said, of that, I'm so glad you've used that code switching thing. I now know what I'm doing with my life because I behave so differently at the university job compared to what I do at X2Y, and I find I'm so much more authentic at X2Y than I am anywhere else. And that masking of identity is such a toll. So having a space that is safer for all of us to show up exactly as we are, how we are at the time, whether that's positively or if we're having a really bad day, having that freedom to be as authentic in every aspect of our life as possible is what makes a safe space.
Thank you. Anybody else? Jack, Emma, Rylee?
Yeah, I think I also was thinking like it is a place or maybe a digital space even, like where you can breathe, like you said, Dhiren, like it's that weight off your shoulders of being like, am I going to be judged? Am I going to get questions I don't want to answer? Am I going to be under scrutiny? Especially talking about intersectionality, like compounded stigma, like if you've got different stigmatized identities, having to defend any one part of that at any one time is so tiring. So I think it is a place where you can simply just exist, as Sam said, in your authentic self. And if you're in a place that might not necessarily feel safe, but you're safe to be authentic, you are I think, taking a step towards making it a safer space for then other people to be themselves. And even if it's not someone who identifies as LGBTQ+, but it's opening up that space to be safer, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. Emma, Jack, would you add anything?
I think I honestly love what everybody's already said. It's brilliant. So I'm going to try and not repeat exactly what everyone said, but add some bits in as well. I think for me, I define a safer space as somewhere that your nervous system doesn't have to be on guard. That's something that I've learned a lot more recently as somebody that is chronically on edge. But yeah, it's not just whether a place is like nice, but it's a place that you can like exist without fearing threat. And that emotional safety isn't created with like slogans or stickers. It's by structure, accountability, and consistency. I think for me, the key one is a safer space is a place where, you know, if something does happen, that harm won't be denied or minimised. And that accountability aspect is there. I think safer spaces don't need to be like quiet or polite. They can be loud or expressive, chaotic, but it's a place where you don't have to shrink yourself. And if something does go wrong, you know exactly what to do to get the support you need.
Great. I like that as well. I often think maybe we do look at safe spaces and see them as being quieter spaces where that kind of don't have that volume to them, but they absolutely can. And I know a lot of the entries that we get through the awards show that as well. Jack.
So I think I took a slightly different take, but I think it builds on quite well to what you were saying about them being loud. Because for me, I kind of took a bit of a community aspect to it. And I think this is quite common for a lot of LGBTQ plus people growing up. So for example, I grew up in kind of the rural Cotswolds, so it very much was the only gay in the village. And I think when you're in those kind of safer spaces, it's also being around people who have that same kind of understanding of experience and can relate to things. And, you know, I mean, I found definitely going into sort of queer spaces and things that suddenly you don't have to explain certain things because people just automatically understand and they've come from the same reference points and often have the same shared experiences or challenges. And I find that very affirming to be around other people. And it's not that, you know, you can't interact with people who haven't got that experience and make connections, but I think sometimes having that shared connection over something that other people will never be able to fully understand from their own lived experience is really important. And I think that for me is often what makes it feel like a safer space is actually everyone in that room is coming from the same perspective. In a certain respect, obviously, the queer community is very diverse and there's that intersectional lens that others have discussed. But it is just that kind of there's a shared experience and everyone's coming from that perspective and has that kind of amity, I think is the word. It might not be, but that, yeah, amity, I think is the word.
Yeah. I like what you're saying there as well, Jack. It makes you kind of like hit on some of the things with my own experience of safe spaces at the moment. For those of you that don't know the details of my personal life, and a lot of you wouldn't, I am currently, well, not currently, I've been back up in the Lake District where I grew up for the last 5 years. And although I probably in the past would have seen myself as being the only gay in the village, there is a lesbian couple up the road with some surrogate children of their own. There's another gay man that I've discovered that lives down the road as well. So that diversity is starting to grow within our village. But it's often, I often feel like I'm doing a lot of work to create a safe space. And so it becomes really hard for me to define it because I'm in some ways I'm the person who's trying to define that safe space and educate other people as well. And that can be quite demanding for any queer person if you're having to do a lot of the work yourself to create that space and define it at the same time, I guess. Is there anything that anybody has said, I'm speaking to the panelists here, that resonated specifically that somebody else has said that you want to build on? Dhiren.
I think for me, I love what we've shared so far today, but something Sam said really specifically resonated with me around this idea of authenticity and how kind of being in different spaces feels like you might be more authentic in one than other. And I think this is something I've been doing a lot of work on myself, and I feel that authenticity doesn't mean that you're the same in every space. I think that for me, authenticity is still feeling that I am myself, but I will be masking and be slightly different in my corporate life than I will be in my life with my friends or with my husband, you know, but they're all authentic. They're just parts. And I think when it comes to safer spaces, we might need to consider that a safer space in a corporate in our employment might be slightly different to what we look for in other areas. And I think that was really interesting that you brought that, Sam.
Go on, Sam.
I was going to say, to even build on that again, like with what Emma said about being loud and in our authenticity and being loud and creative, and it doesn't have to be quiet. That's the one thing I love with my X2Y stuff, is that we deal primarily with young people, 11 to 17s and then 18 plus. And my Saturdays are the most noisy days of my life, because they are young people, they're loud, they're showing up authentically in that we can be loud, we can scream at Cookie Run Kingdom or some other random thing that they've found this week. Like, they can show up authentically with themselves as well as to us, and we can do the same with them. We can, be just as excitable in that intersectionality, with a lot of us are neurodiverse as well, myself included. So we often bounce that between us. So it's lovely to have these connections with it, like you said, Dhiren, these intersections of our authenticity, and being loud and rambunctious and as wonderfully proud, or as subtly proud as we want to, but having the space and freedom to do so.
I think as well, whilst you're all talking about this as well, I'm thinking about safe spaces, things like Pride itself. And it has its origins within protests and everything. So there's obviously a lot of volume that comes with that as well. There's almost, in a way, for me, when I think about Prides and their ability to provide a safe space, there's their very visible safe space within a community where people might not necessarily feel safe. And there's an element of being very bold, being confident, being authentic about who you are, and an element of carefree as well. I wouldn't want to kind of generalize and say that everybody that's at a Pride event is carefree, because I suppose to a degree, sadly, I suppose in the world that we're living in at the moment, there's an element of always looking around over your shoulder, and even when you're in a safe space like that. But so many different great versions of how people would define a safe space there.